My name is Eugene Sepulveda. I am the CEO and co-founder of Culturati. For those of you new to Culturati, we're a community of executives who get the power of culture. We come together to share our playbooks. We further research by publishing and commissioning. And we believe that we can change the world through the workplace together. It's my honor to have friends from Indeed and Glassdoor with us today. And Indeed and Glassdoor are partners in Culturati. It's the first time that we've had the chance to meet Svenja and Aaron. I want to tell a little bit about Svenja Gudell, who's Indeed's chief economist, currently serves on the board of the National Association for Business Economics. Prior to Indeed, she was the chief economist at Zillow, and her professional credentials go back all the way to research for the Federal Reserve with a PhD from the University of Rochester. Aaron Terrazas is Glassdoor's chief economist. He previously served as the director of economic research at Convoy, and was in a similar role at Zillow, where they worked together. He started his career supporting the deputy assistant secretary at the U.S. Treasury, and his degrees are from Johns Hopkins and Georgetown University. Thank you both for agreeing to be here and share this really important report with us. So at this point, I'm gonna go into the background and let you guys make the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eugene, and thanks for inviting us. We are both Aaron and I are delighted to be here. We figured for ease, it would be good if I just kicked us off, and then Aaron is going to take us home, and we'll do a handoff midway, if you will. Both of our teams at Indeed and Glassdoor came together to produce this report, and really how this came about is that both Indeed and Glassdoor have very unique data, and hard to get this kind of data at other places. And so our teams throughout the year look at really interesting trends and cutting edge trends that we can spot in the data that we think will be important going forward. So we thought it'd be a great opportunity to come together and actually see what we both believe will happen in 2023 and many years beyond that. Important to note here is, as we jump into this report, is that the world is changing very fast, and I'm sure you're all experiencing a little bit of whiplash, having gone through the boom and bust and emerging from the pandemic with an extremely strong labor market still and a tight labor market. And so a lot of these trends that we'll identify here will actually, last throughout time. So I think they will apply to many more years beyond 2023, and we'll have these short-term cyclical, developments, recessions, economic slowdowns, and we will emerge with these trends still intact. So that's important to note. So with that, let me jump right in and show you what our combined teams were able to work up. So during this presentation, we'll talk about 5 main trends that we were able to identify. The first being that a tight labor supply will continue to impact hiring going forward. We believe remote work is here to stay. While compensation is still king, and I was told I should call it queen. Compensation is queen. Benefits can set companies apart and be a good differentiator. Happiness at work really matters to workers. And lastly, diversity, equity, and inclusion will remain at the forefront as we traverse through the years here. So let's dig right into our first trend, that a tight labor market will continue to impact hiring going forward. And this number is for the US. We're currently seeing 1.7 job openings per unemployed worker. That number has come down slightly. It used to be right around 2 only a few months ago, which was an unprecedented high. Pre-pandemic was much lower, right around 1.2. And while this is the US number, this number is actually, or a number like this one is very very common in many other large economies right now. Every economy out there is expecting or is seeing a fairly strong labor market, and a very tight one at that. So this has been an interesting trend, particularly while we're battling recessions or possible recessions at the moment, kind of looking at that with transposed with this very strong labor market. Now, what I think it's important to talk about here, though, is the fact that even though we're currently in a tight labor market, and we're looking at economic slowdowns, we do believe that the labor market will continue to be tight, mostly driven by demographics. And if you think about it for a moment, most industrialized countries right now have an aging population. So this has been going on pre-pandemic, and this is a trend that will continue to be with us. Birth rates are low enough that our overall population is shifting, the distribution is shifting to put the bulk of the or a large portion of the working population over time into the tail of the distribution, meaning it's aging out. So we'll have a lot more people in the 65 plus category eventually that require healthcare and a lot of other services, but we'll have a smaller pool of people actually available inside that working population or working age population. Here you see it being denoted by the 15 to 65-year-old category. And these are World Bank population estimates. And you can see that some countries more than others, and has to do a lot with immigration and migration flows, are going to experience a smaller workforce in the years ahead. And Germany's hit hard. Japan, not being on this graph right now, is also currently experiencing this phenomenon heavily, and will continue to see this trend going forward. So this will be with us, and this means that going forward, there's not going to be a very strong influx of supply of labor, and we're going to battle these demographic forces for quite some time. Next slide, please. Now, what can you actually do about this? There are there are a few things that employers can consider. One possible solution is to consider and attract overlooked workers. Here in this particular graph, what you're seeing is the share of searches, so job seekers going into Indeed and actually searching for particular jobs containing fair chance phrases, meaning these are previously, or this is looking for jobs that are available to previously incarcerated people, or people that have a record that want to find jobs that are open to hiring this population. So that search has increased quite a bit. We've also seen job postings mentioning fair chance hiring more throughout the years, most notably over the last 2 years here. And that's just one overlooked population. Another population to consider is certainly folks with disabilities and anyone who might benefit from remote work. We've seen the numbers of disabled workers increase as remote work has increased, because not having to participate in a commute oftentimes helps that particular population. As we'll talk a little bit later on, women also very much enjoy remote work, and giving that flexibility on the job will also help attract workers. And then, before I actually get into remote work, definitely worth noting that immigration policies will also help here, and technology in the long run will help, right? We're talking decades of advancements in technology will at some point further increase productivity, and will help with making your workforce more productive, thus needing fewer people. So let's turn to the second trend. I'm sorry, I'm battling a bit of a cold right now, so I apologize my coughing in between. So we believe remote work is here to stay, and we looked at both sides of the coin on this one, and looked at remote job postings, which is what you see here. So these are job postings on Indeed that actually mention some sort of remote work. And it's either a hybrid setup where you are coming into the office a few days a week, or you're fully remote, or have some sort of this remote flexibility included in the jobs. And you can see that from September of 2019 to September of 2022, that's the move from the blue to the orange line, you saw a significant pickup. A lot of that was, of course, pandemic induced, as many of us had to actually, due to work from home orders, move into the home office. But many of us actually stayed in the home office. And we're still seeing a lot of flexibility being offered in job postings. For the US, for example, this number is currently 8.6. It has come down ever so slightly from where it was at the height of the pandemic, right around 10, but remains fairly strong. Now, in the next graph that you see here, this is the other side. This is remote job searches. And this is actually the job seeker demand side of things, if you will. This is how many people are looking for jobs that have some sort of remote aspect to them. And interestingly enough, the number here, so look at the US orange bar here, 9.8, this number has not come down. So over the last, I'd say 6 or so months, we've seen continued interest, strong interest in remote work without having that level off at all. So we believe remote work is going to be with us in some shape or form going forward. And a lot of companies are, of course, grappling right now with what the right combination, what the right mix is, and what the impacts are of remote work. And we haven't quite cracked the nut on any of that yet, but the trend will certainly be there. And the US is showing the highest interest, at least in the numbers that we're seeing here. But you can see elevation across many other different countries, pre versus post pandemic. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to remote work, also, we wanted to dig in a little bit more and also figure out, all right, what is it about remote work? Who is considering it, and why is it so important? So in that search, we ran an additional survey and found that women in particular really value remote work. And so we asked, hey, what are your reasons for wanting a new job? Why are you switching or newly entering and actively searching for a job? And while probably to no one's surprise, everyone would like higher pay, but particularly for women, you can see that in the second set of bars there, women more so than men value a remote job. And that is really, if you start to think about it, not surprising, given that women had to carry a lot of the load of watching the kids or doing homeschooling or whatever else it was during the pandemic, and still have those childcare responsibilities oftentimes going forward. Balancing a job with these duties can be, I can personally attest to this, can be tricky at times. We're lucky that we're not having my kids randomly walk into on the Zoom call. So being able to balance both, what really helps here is the remote work aspect. And I think that's a big takeaway, particularly as you think back for the trend beforehand, wanting to attract different populations and giving more, increasing your labor pool. Offering remote work also will bring in a lot more women into the workforce. So now turning to our third trend for just a moment, we saw that as workers seek higher pay, and you just saw that in the previous slide, right? As you are switching jobs, oftentimes pay is a main driver. Benefits can really set employers apart. So we dug into our pay data, and we found that 20 is really the new 15. And you see the dark blue line, and I apologize, it's kind of hard to see here. I guess it's given that we have a very dark line on here as well. It's like the middle to dark blue line is the $15 line. And you can see that while searching for $15 jobs used to be the norm, number of searches that have actually gone towards a $15 search have decreased over time and has been taken over by that orange line, the $20 line. And even searches for $25 have increased over time. So it's really a measure to show that the expectations of job seekers on wages has increased quite a bit. Excuse me. And we've seen interest in more pay, but not only have we seen that, we have seen benefits are on the rise as well. And this is overall, when looking at US job postings, we've seen that the mentions of other benefits like health insurance, retirement plans, and pay time off has steadily increased over time. And that was quite interesting to us. So particularly for the US, we dug in a little further. And on the next slide, you'll see When you actually take the wage distribution, split it by low, middle, and high wages, you can see that particularly amongst the low wage bucket, that first bar right there, the blue bar, we've seen an intense increase of over time, oftentimes over 100% of certain benefits. For example, pay time off. So a lot more of these lower paid postings are offering or advertising benefits as part of their overall description of the job, and saying you will get paid time off, you will have health insurance, you'll have retirement plans associated with this. In the US, that's not as common as it is, of course, in other countries. So, when we replicate this study for, say, the UK, we'd have to look at other benefits since healthcare is standard. But this was very interesting to us, and we believe that including some of these benefits will really set employers apart and will give you a leg up when you're hiring for talent. These benefits, the more standard ones, increased, but we also saw other types of benefits increase. If we switch to the next slide, we see that benefits like a free lunch have also increased. And as an economist, I'm going to tell you there is no such thing as a free lunch, but there was a free lunch advertised, or we see it in benefit reviews on Glassdoor. When Aaron brought his analysis that his team had worked on, it was really interesting to see that traditionally we think of the tech industry as being a main driver for free lunches. We actually started to see a lot of free lunches pop up in worker reviews for different types of industries. And we see aerospace, defense, manufacturing, transportation, logistics having an increased share in free lunches as well. And these are oftentimes, workers that have to, are not able to work remotely, that have to be on the job. And we're seeing, a different portfolio, a different mix of benefits, including a free lunch along the way there too. Now, on the next slide, you'll see part of that new portfolio is also mental health care. We've seen a tick up in particularly during the pandemic of employers offering mental health care as part of the healthcare package to a lot of employees, and that certainly was a huge benefit during the pandemic, and we believe that this will continue to be on the rise going forward. And with that, if you switch over to the next slide, that brings us to trend number 4, and I'm actually going to hand the mic over to Aaron. Take us away.
Thanks for leading us off, Svenja, and for walking us through those first 3 trends. So the final 2 trends in the report and the end of the last trend on benefits really relied on Glassdoor data, and I think are more focused on workplace experience and on employee retention, and that's really kind of where Glassdoor's bread and butter is. So Svenja just finished talking about the shifting landscape of hiring and comp and benefits. I think the reality for a lot of employees is that the most valuable, if often unspoken, benefit is a healthy workplace culture. And so, in the original report, we called this Happiness Matters. I took advantage of the extra space here on the slide to add a little bit of some richer context. But again, kind of healthy workplace culture is rare, it's valuable, it's something that employees truly do value. And I think over the past year, Americans voiced their satisfaction or lack thereof with their workplace culture by voting with their feet. Now, this chart, which is based on Glassdoor data, shows a tight relationship between how satisfied workers are in their current role. The horizontal axis is basically what do workers rate their current company on a 5-star rating? How do they rate their current role? And then the vertical axis are the odds, the probability that they will apply to a job elsewhere. So, perhaps no surprise, workers who rate their company lower are more likely to apply elsewhere, and workers who rate their company higher are much less likely to do so. Maybe this feels obvious, but I think the really powerful thing in this data is that it allows us to quantify the magnitude of that intuition. Workers who rate their company a 5 stars on a 5-star scale are half as likely as their peers who rate their company 1 to 2 stars to apply elsewhere. Just to put some numbers around this, for a mid-sized company with average labor turnover, that works out to anywhere from 20 to 50 fewer quits per year. 20 to 50 fewer people that you need to go backfill. Even as the labor market cools into 2023 from the extreme tightness of this past year, I think the scars of the Great Resignation are going to be slow to fade, and there is going to be more attention to the hidden costs of labor churn and retention, what keeps employees in that 5 or 4-star category as opposed to that 1 or 2-star category. Sooner or later, the labor market always swings from one extreme to another. The economy is cyclical, it always is. And I think it is important to keep in mind that long-term orientation. People don't build their careers, you don't build a company for the next quarter, for the next half year, you build it for the next decade, hopefully decade plus. And I think that's really important to keep the eye on that longer term orientation in these tumultuous times like right now. The final trend we have in the next slide is about diversity and inclusion investments. I think kind of our takeaway is that they're not going away, although there are headwinds out there in the economy. And so the next slide really shows the share of companies with diversity programs according to these Glassdoor benefit reviews. And those are reviews when someone goes in Glassdoor and says, yes, my company offers this benefit. No, my company does not offer this benefit. And this data shows the different trends or similar trends in the US, Canada, and the United Kingdom. And the access kind of companies offering diversity programs surged in 2020 and 2021. But then it looks like that share plateaued, maybe even slightly declined in 2022. I think the question kind of we're all asking ourselves right now is, was this plateau in 2022 really just companies taking a breather after 2 years of rapid growth and expansion? Was it a result of businesses grappling with other urgently burning fires and burning challenges that we've all had to deal with this past year? Or is this a new plateau? Have we reached kind of the maximum share of companies that can offer these programs? My team did a separate kind of double dive into these data that we published a couple of weeks ago after this broader report was released. And when you dig into the US data, access grew across industries. This is it really expanded for every industry in the economy. There was one exception, government and public administration, where access actually declined from 2019 to 2022. In 2019, kind of the public sector was a leader when it comes to diversity programs. Now it's solidly middle of the pack. And I'll note kind of that the UK saw a similar trend to the US. Access continued to expand in Canada, although at a slower pace than it had been in previous years. So in the next slide, we surveyed workers and job seekers about their attitudes toward these programs. Kind of across the board, I think the takeaway is that they are much more important to younger workers. So, we asked workers, would you consider leaving a job or not accepting an offer, under various scenarios, if kind of you did not think your management supported DE&I initiatives, if you thought there was kind of gender imbalance in company leadership, if you thought that there was a lack of racial ethnic diversity in company leadership. And overwhelmingly, we see that much higher shares of younger workers and job seekers say that these things are important to them. Double click on this data in the next slide. I think one of the interesting things is that it's not just younger workers. They're also differences, by gender, by race, ethnicity. These programs are much more important for women. These programs are much more important for non-white workers. And I think this speaks to the point that Svenja made earlier about attracting kind of workers at the margins of the labor force back into the workforce. What kind of attracts these marginal workers? What keeps them in the workforce? One interesting point that we found in that supplemental brief, and I'm happy to share the link after I'm done speaking. If we go to the next slide, is that gender gap was driven entirely by kind of older workers. There is no gender gap among Gen Z and among millennials. Workers basically in their early 40s or younger. Diversity programs are equally important for men and women. For those younger generations. For older generations, they do tend to be more important for women than for men. For that reason, I think if we go into the next slide, our key takeaway is this: kind of looking out into 2023 kind of the extent that businesses are focused on attracting and retaining these younger workers, these programs are going to be something that they're going to ask about. And it is important to keep in mind, again, that longer term orientation beyond whatever happens in the first half of 2023, maintaining these programs are something that is important to younger workers, the future of the workforce. So I think if we go to the next slide, which I think is the final content slide we have, this slide just summarizes kind of those 5 trends that Svenja and I walked through. And if you kind of, in the next slide, this is a QR code where you can scan your phone and download the full report. Will take you to the Glassdoor website where you can download that. But I think it's actually time now, Eugene, if we want to turn it over to Q&A. I don't know if you had some questions or if we want to go to audience questions, however you want to proceed.
Yeah, thank you both. Really, it's why when we got this report, I was very excited about sharing it with our Culturati members, and thank you for a very concise and clear summary of that. I wanted to get you guys, I don't know if the audience kind of realizes what a unique opportunity you guys have for probably more touch points than any 2 other companies could get for people looking for employment. So can you tell a little bit about the universe of data that you had to come up with these conclusions?
Love to. So Indeed is the world's #1 job site, and we have a platform where you can actually search for jobs and post your resume, and do anything in between. We have company reviews, we have the job postings, and we have different tools for employers to actually help them in the hiring process. So the data we generate reaches or starts fairly broad at job seeker searches to actual job postings across 60 countries, and then goes, we have a funnel, if you will. We also get insight into how employers think about hiring, if they do any sort of assessments along the way, what that process looks like, all the way into the final hire as well. And so we collect data along the way that is depersonalized, of course. Though then we look at interesting trends that we can find.
Yeah, and so Glassdoor really is kind of the leading destination for salary insights and workplace reviews. It really started a decade and a half ago when people started kind of sharing salaries online and kind of posting reviews about what it was like to work at their particular workplace. And that fundamentally is the data that we use really to understand workplace experience and workplace culture. So it involves a lot of text analysis, natural language processing on kind of the written reviews that people leave with other companies. There's more structured data around the types of benefits, kind of how satisfied or unsatisfied people are with their executive leadership, their feelings about the business outlook for their companies, kind of interview insights for job candidates. So again, it's really more about workplace experience and workplace culture.
Well, thank you, guys. I think you, particularly the 2 companies combined, are uniquely have a unique set of eyes and ears, and as much data points as anyone else to publish a report like this. And I think it gives it a certain authority, which is why I was very excited to bring it forward for our Culturati audience. And not to mention that Chris Himes, who you guys know, the CEO of Indeed, is one of Austin's favorite people of all time. I call him the Buddhist priest of the corporate world. So
he's amazing.
He is amazing. So there's a statement at the beginning of the report that says the workplace is has been forever reshaped by the pandemic. Tell me about that. What does that mean?
It was the way I think about this is that, well, first of all, I think this will be the point in time we will look back onto and say, like, this was a pivotal moment in the labor in the labor market, and really a pivotal moment for a lot of other things as well. But a lot of trends were pre-existing to the pandemic. The pandemic sped some of those up, and it also introduced new trends along the way. And I think in terms of the labor force, there was a bit of an awakening, because you realized all of a sudden, particularly now that you're oftentimes mixing home life and work life much more, that gosh, you see your work colleagues a lot more than you actually see your friends and your family. So you better like them and enjoy working, and have it be a fulfilling, better gives you some sort of fulfillment along the way. And I think there was a bit of a great realization that kicked in, given that we had this reshuffling that also happened. A lot of people ended up switching jobs and trying something new, and searching for more. Sometimes that was pay, and sometimes that was pay plus something else, or it was just something else all together. And I think the pandemic really spurred that, and it really made you question what you wanted out of your job and how you were going to interact with it. And once the genie's out of the bottle, it's really hard to put that back in. And I think that thought process will stay with us. And given that the labor market is still tight and will continue to be tight, we're also, despite these short-term economic woes that we're seeing, we're going to see employees wanting a larger voice. They're going to want to be heard, and they're going to have demands. And I think that will certainly stay with us for the foreseeable future. Aaron, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that one too.
No, I think you captured it very nicely. I think many people in the business world look back to 2000 as this pivotal moment in manufacturing and supply chains, when globalization suddenly shifted the way we think about our businesses and about the world. Right. I think the pandemic and the shift to remote work was a globalization moment for the labor force. Suddenly, to reference Tom Friedman's book from 20 years ago, the world of work is flat. That means there's going to be exceptional returns to exceptional talent, and kind of probably lower returns to anything less than that. And I think it's really we're just starting, we're in the early innings of this transformation. We're starting still just to see what it means, and for the way our economy works, for the way our businesses work.
So I want to remind the audience the 5 trends. So tighter labor supply will continue to impact hiring, that remote work is here to stay. As workers seek higher pay, benefits can set employers apart. Happiness and wellness and well-being matter. And the changing workforce pushes diversity, equity, inclusion to the forefront. Let's go back to the first one, the tighter labor supply. So, we're hearing, many people believe we're on the precipice of recession. I don't know that all the data supports that, but if we do enter a recession, does that change predictions for a tighter labor market?
In the short term, we'll definitely see fluctuations in the labor supply, right? Labor force participation in the U.S. is not quite back to where it was pre-pandemic. It's super close, but it like bounces around a little bit. Yeah. In other countries, it has surpassed the pre-pandemic threshold. So it kind of depends on what country you're talking about. And certainly, if we enter an economic recession and layoffs are much more likely, the unemployment rate will rise, and the expectation, at least by the Fed, is that, and many others, that unemployment will go up, and that will mean there are more people to actually urgently search for a job, and you might, as an employer, you might have an easier time than hiring, right? And that might happen in the short term, but this is all amongst the backdrop that, in the grand scheme of things, we're so tight right now. It would take quite a bit of movement to like relax it to a point where you're really starting to feel like, wow, there's so much labor available. And I don't think we'll actually reach that point. And so there might be like some ups and downs, squeezing out some movement here and there. But in the grand scheme of things, we'll stay tight despite economic possible recessions and economic uncertainty.
Let me ask you, I was surprised reading an article just yesterday that attributed some of the tight labor supply to the lack of availability of daycare, since we've now lost 40 to 50% of available daycare. Do you think that has a have you found that has a measurable impact on the availability of labor?
Yes, I think we're still, we could be having more women join the workforce, and daycare cost and availability is still an issue. And another reason is, so I completely agree with that. And then I think another issue is that, particularly during the pandemic, we saw a lot of the older workforce leave. So anyone 65 plus or even 55 plus exited the workforce. Some unretired. We actually have a bunch of interesting research on that, where we saw unretiring happening, particularly because all of a sudden wages went up and it looked much more attractive to once again work. And then inflation kicked in and your nest egg didn't carry you as far as you thought it was going to carry you. So we had some return to the workforce, but not everyone returned. So we had a lot of older people completely retire from the workforce, and that also impacted the overall pool.
I want to, and I'll just remind the audience to look at and consider more of what you guys talked about, the overlooked workers. And I'll call out a company, a Culturati member company, WP Engine, the CEO, Heather Bruner, who's done more in Austin to recruit and then invest massively in the training of non-college graduates, and who have proven to be some of the best employees up the line, loyal, appreciative. And it was really critical in Austin because of, you think the labor supply is tight, nationwide. In Austin, it's even more so. I want to go to another important point that you've made, which is the declining work age. This seems quite worrisome until I start thinking about projections for declining job availabilities as relates to automation and artificial intelligence. What are your thoughts on the convergence of these two?
Aaron and I talk a lot about this, and we don't think machines are gonna, take all of our jobs anytime soon. But there's certainly, there are two trends happening at the same time. There's automation and the way technology is going to be adapted and hopefully increase productivity. And then there's the rate at which the population is aging. So how many people actually age out of the workforce. And it's yet to be determined where those trends cross. So which one's going to move faster? And the hope is that as you have the population age, technology and productivity will pick up enough to kind of make up for the slack along the way. And so that, you don't find yourself one day thinking, I don't have enough workers, period, anymore, right? And you're in a really tough spot. Hopefully technology will increase enough to actually make up for that gap and provide additional productivity boost, additional productivity boost, so that the smaller pool of workers won't be as noticeable.
You're in, and I'm going to go quickly just because I want to get to audience questions, but your second trend about remote work is here to stay. We have a lot of conversations among CEOs who are insecure about productivity of remote workers and who are trending toward more people in the workplace. I think if not the concern about productivity, certainly a concern about collaboration, creativity, and innovation. What are you hearing from employees about a balance between more of a hybrid structure?
Yeah, I think this concern about productivity is pretty widespread across the economy right now. And we actually did see 2 consecutive quarters of declining business service sector productivity in the US in Q2 or Q1 and Q2 of this past year. In Q3, we started to see a little bit of a recovery. I suspect kind of a lot of the decline in productivity that we saw nationwide had more to do with the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffling, and the elevated quits rate. The funny thing when you ask about productivity is that you ask kind of people how they feel about their own productivity with remote work. They overwhelmingly say it is kind of way up, You ask kind of executives, kind of they have this fear that it is down. So there's clearly a perception gap between what people are feeling and what their and kind of what their managers or senior leadership. I think fundamentally that's about the role of management and the skills of management changing in remote contexts. You used to be able to kind of see your worker in the office and assume that they were being productive, and now you don't see them, so you just have no idea what's going on. The reality is kind of you look at hours worked. People are generally working longer hours. That's I'm kind of, you have to question how sustainable that is. They're working irregular hours, and so yes, they take breaks and kind of they're splitting up their kind of schedules to go pick up kids or take kids to the dentist or do laundry or take their dog for a walk. But in overall, kind of they're working longer hours when they're working remote. I think when it comes to remote work and productivity, one last point is that like there's no one size fits all here solution for companies. I think companies are going to decide what is best for them when it comes to remote work, and they just need to be conscious that those decisions are going to shape the types of workers they can attract, and by extension, the types of products that those workers build. Younger workers who want to be in the office are going to take more risks. Older workers are going to be kind of a little bit more conscious of those risks, and they generally want to be remote.
My friends at McKinsey and Company coined a phrase, which the workplace needs to be the old offsite. So it needs to be configured so that when we come there, it is all about collaboration and creativity, innovation. And I think that is catching on in many places. We're seeing there's got to be a payoff to come to the workplace. But I'm gonna jump ahead because.
And by the way, Eugene, we're seeing that in data for office. If the companies that outfit offices also see that trend, like the way offices are being set up and what kind of amenities are being included.
Yeah, like we used to go to separate places for offsites versus that's what people are reconfiguring. But you also touched on, Aaron, that people feel like they're working more hours. So I think this is directly connected to happiness and wellness. I believe in the next Culturati Summit, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the full human. Part of Culturati's ambition is we think that we can change the world through the workplace, and we think we can significantly impact people's health and wellness in families and communities through the workplace. There is increasingly, and I'm certainly seeing it in the C-suites these days. I think the C-suite was the last one to show the evidence of the stress of the pandemic. While they were, men and women were keeping their families safe and supported, and their companies and all the employees, we've seen a real epidemic of burnout, anxiety, other stress-induced situations. I think. Can you talk a little bit, if you saw any data about productivity, burnout, and health, both physical health and mental health, within your data?
Sure. I mean, I think kind of the data that Svenja presented on access to mental health care kind of really speaks for itself. Kind of that, we looked at a range of benefits, and there's, usually some diverging trends across industries. Some, you see benefits increasing in some industries, declining in other. The one benefit that was growing across industries, across the economy, was access to mental health care. And I think that speaks to, the times for a lot of reasons. I also think kind of, burnout is intrinsically related to this elevated quits rate, the great resignation, the great reshuffling, whatever you want to call it. And there is this vicious cycle where burnout leads to quits, which leads teams to be overextended or disconnected, and that leads to quits. And so, breaking that vicious cycle between kind of burnout, quitting, and team productivity, I think is really critical over the next year to 2 years as we think about getting out of the pandemic obsessed economy. So.
Well, I'm also in conversations where the lack of rest is people are studying whether that leads to a lack of empathy. And not only are we seeing the impact of the lack of empathy in the workplace, We certainly see it in the broader American society right now. I think all over the world, there could be some correlation between, almost 24/7 workplace when you're doing it remotely, and the acrimony and the lack of empathy that we're seeing in broader worlds. And in considering that empathy has turned out to be the number one factor for effective leadership today, I think boards and companies ought to be spending a lot of time and attention on this. I'm going to ask the audience to post questions in the chat. Last thing I'll say is the information about DE&I and its importance to younger millennials and Zers is, oh my God. I've always been a big proponent of DE&I initiatives, but younger millennials and Zers are just demanding it. Is that how to interpret the data?
I think it's table stakes for those generations.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Yep.
Misty in my office, I have to apologize for her for every time pushing me on DE&I about our programming, because I realize it's just baked into her DNA. And it's a little bit unsettling because I think, wait, I was one of the pioneers in here. I'm a queer Mexican, in the corporate world. I've been pushing DE&I, but evidently not enough. So I'm glad to see it. Let's see what other questions. I did see Morgan had listed something here before, which is, do you see new shared measurements for what success looks like in this emerging dynamic, or is it too fluid? And I think he's talking about culture. So are you guys coming up with or seeing new metrics that we might explore?
I don't know if we're seeing new metrics per se. What we've seen across a lot of companies is a higher rate of surveys. I think gone are the days of doing the once a year employee survey or even the twice a year employee survey. I've seen a lot of companies switching to pulse surveys, quick ones, or even within team trying to get a better measure. And what we're including in those surveys is changing. So it's including a lot of growth and development type questions, like, are you seeing this, adding those types of programs. And then we're seeing that stress levels are being measured and just employee perceptions. And I do think, and this is certainly happening at Indeed, and I saw it at other companies as well. OKRs are being formulated around those. So measuring these things as best possible, and then trying to attach OKRs to those to be able to measure progress.
And just to add on there, I think one of the things that we often say at Glassdoor is that kind of your culture, your brand is kind of what your employees are saying about you behind your back, and that's kind of how businesses think about their brand. It's what your customers think about or saying about you when you're not listening. And increasingly over the pandemic, we realized that these infrequent once a year, twice a year surveys, the data gets stale so quickly, and to have a real-time pulse on what your employees are saying about you, that's something that we offer kind of Glassdoor customers, is the ability to keep that real-time pulse on what customers or their employees are saying about their executives, about their company's outlook.
Good, thank you. I don't know how to interpret this, since my business coach has put a question on here and saying, if you have a bad culture, what's the timeline to turn it around? Do you guys have any insights into really what companies are doing once they identify shortcomings, and what kind of timelines they're adopting?
I guess yesterday is better than today, and today is better than tomorrow. So it seems like a healthy step to realize that. But I think it really goes down to that listening point. The executive skill set shifted with the pandemic, with the remote context of kind of decision making and strategy, to listening. And I think kind of the listening skill set is all the more important. Listening to your employees, listening to your customers. That's what executives need to be good at nowadays. And that's not something that I think a lot of executives necessarily were trained in.
Go ahead, please.
I was gonna add that I don't know if there's a magic recipe for fixing culture, but I do know that it has to start from the top, and we've seen that in a lot of our surveys as well, right, Aaron? In the D&I survey, management has to actually care. SLT has to really care about a lot of these aspects, and then it has to trickle down. They have to be good role models. So it's less of a let's fix the company culture, and have our employees do something or change something. It's what can we do, and have that be setting the example for the entire company, and have that be trickled down into the entire org. And I think it has to start from the top.
And I'm reminded of two of the silver linings we saw in data. There was a Harvard Business School study, and I think he surveyed 3,700 employees around the world. The two things that stood out were the CEOs who became the chief communicators during the pandemic and really delegated almost everything else were really bright spots to employees. And then the caring that employees showed toward each other, and feeling that they became more intimate and aware of each other by being online and seeing children, come up, and pets, and seeing people's premises. Those two items have stood out as really important to employees. So, Aaron, following up on your point about communication. Another question that we have is an audience member wondering if you can share advice on in-person or hybrid policies. How do you bring employees back to the office for 2 to 3 days? And what do you do when they get upset about having to come back?
Well, I'll give you my fairly personal view on this one. I should preface, this depends on every company setup, right? There is no, I don't think there's a one size fits all approach. For some companies and for some type of work, being in person is absolutely necessary. For other types of work, you can be remote. So, let me say that at the outset. But I think particularly in this environment, listen to your employees. If they're able to do a really good job remote, and that is a perk that they like to keep, I would push to do everything to try to keep them in that remote setup. I also think it's really hard to do a good job having a hybrid setup. I feel like we've all been through this, where it's like, what day are you showing up at the office? Because I'm going to come up on this day, and oh, you won't be there. Well, why would I come then? And so there's a lot of back and forth and trying to see like what works and what doesn't work. One call out I do have is that we have yet to learn a whole lot about remote work and what kind of new biases this will introduce. How is the desire for FaceTime going to play out in all of this? Are promotion prospects impacted? If women are more likely to choose remote jobs, will they have a slower trajectory of promotions? How are we going to be good about including everyone? We've all been in the really bad Zoom call where 5 people are in the office and everyone else is remote, and that mix is still really hard to do. So I don't think there's an easy approach here. I would just I would say really try to listen to your employees and try to collect data to see what actually works and what doesn't work versus your notions of what might be the truth.
The one point I'd add, totally agree with that, is my mind goes back to regulatory economics and the lessons from that literature. And no business wants to be in the business of enforcing rules for their employees. Carrots are a lot easier than sticks.
Well, you two, and I know there's more audience questions. I want to give you each about 30 seconds to wrap up, and then I'll do a close. Svenja, anything we should have asked or that you want to reinforce from this report?
Love this discussion. So thank you. Fantastic questions. I really think that this is a pivotal moment. And I'm really just excited to see how the data will kind of fall out and what additional learnings we will have. And I would just say, try to change is hard, and trying to, be on the leading edge and trying to see what happens is also really hard. So I would encourage, employers to be creative and experiment and see what works out, and not be afraid to switch if something doesn't work so well, or try something different.
Well, Aaron?
Yeah, no, I'll echo everything Svenja says. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for the opportunity to share kind of these trends, and learn so much from the questions about what you all are thinking. And definitely is a positive feedback loop to understand what's happening in our economy. It's kind of the future always humbles us. It's a wild and crazy place, and I think kind of anyone who looks toward the future has to keep that in mind. So we certainly kind of approach this task with a lot of humility.
You guys have produced a very provocative report that I hope not only makes it to the C-suite, but to the boardrooms. And boards have the responsibility to monitor culture these days, even as expressed by NACD. But I think in these hiring and retention trends, there needs to be a dashboard at the board level to make sure that we're appropriately addressing the 5 trends that you pointed out. I want to tell the rest of the people for Culturati that we've adopted our 3 pillars going forward for programming in 2023, and they are leadership reimagined. It's about new expectations for leaders, building leadership as a core skill, and what are the important soft skills. And we're going to have a through line of specifically talking about leadership, removing the systemic obstacles as relates to leadership for women in major corporation, in any corporation. We're going to be talking about talent in a hybrid workplace, hiring resources, engagement, development and coaching, and redefining productivity. We have several friends both at Microsoft and at McKinsey that are taking a deep dive in what a redefined definition of productivity might mean. And we'll bring forward last year's pillar about the future of the workplace, but also with a greater focus on people, place, and then teams and technology. You two talked about who's coming in and how we're interacting. I think it's time for, and we know it's time for, new technology that empowers us as if we were face to face. And we've been using this flat single dimensional technology now, and there's a lot new out there. To all of you for coming and joining us today, thank you. Thanks for participating. Svenja and Aaron, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.